So welcome to our first session. This is kind of still a special session. This is with Kai Niggemann and Femina Wenzel. We are having here a lecture performance, just going like 40 minutes, and after we have an artist talk. So our first speaker, Kai Niggemann, he is a sound artist and lecturer from Münster, and I was reading a little from Cologne. Yeah, but you are working. Yeah, but you're working also as a lecturer in Münster.
I work.
Yeah. All right. And I was reading something very interesting about you. It says that Kai creates poetically abstracted music. And looking very forward to it. So Kai, thank you that you're here, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. You don't know what's coming. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate your coming. I'm going to do this thing in several parts. The first part is going to be, I'm going to talk, and the second part will make sounds together. You all will make sounds with me. And first I want to introduce myself. I want to introduce the background of the thing that we're going to do today. And then I want to introduce the thing and teach you how to make these sounds that we do. Let me start with myself so you know that who's talking to you. My name is Kai Niggemann. I was born in Bochum in Germany, and I used to live in Münster. That's why I have a lot of contacts in Münster. The piece that I'm talking about was created in Münster for a theater that's an off-scene theater that's located in Münster. And we have since relocated to Cologne, which is a great city for sound artists. If you ever want to come to Germany and visit Cologne, give me a ring. It's a really beautiful city to be at and to, I don't know, it's a great vibe. You know, Stockhausen worked there. It's a scene, you know, it's really good. And for me, please come in. For me, as somebody who's lived in the provincial town of Münster for a while, for too long, I nourish in that. I make music, electronic music, and sounds since 1993, basically. I was in bands. I've never had any formal musical training. I play this and that, and then in 1993, I bought a sampler to make electronic music. And I started, exploring techno. I thought I was late with the techno thing in 1993, and I started making stuff like that. And the stuff that really always interested me was experimental sounds and weird musics. And then in 1995, I came across this book called The Tuning of the World, which I'm sure you all have in your bookshelf and probably read. And it really changed my life, as it has changed so many lives of the people who are here, I guess. And it made me much more aware. And then discovering all these musicians like John Cage and his silence and his concepts of silence and all these things, and then really, changed me into the direction that, now I'm in this niche of really weird music. It's fun, and I like to do it. These days I create music for theater a lot, which is a great niche where experimental music is very suitable and finds a space for a lot of people can accept it there. It's a stage that has something else to offer, especially with dance. We have a lot of music, but it helps people to get into the music and to accept the music for what it is. I also play Modular Synthesizer, the Buchla 200E, which is a very crazy machine that you don't usually play with the keyboard. You play it in a way that you patch chords together and then modules together, and then you create this automaton that basically plays with you because it creates music sort of by itself. And that's what I try to do. I try to make this thing my partner in playing music. And I've created a record with that Buchla music that you can find at the table in the front. Am I pointing in the right direction? Is that the front? I'm kind of lost. And this is something that I do a lot. That's I play the Buchla, I tour with it, and I do a lot of that. I started working in theater in the year 2000, and by pure coincidence, and I realized soon that all the weird music that I like to make and everything else really fits into the theater. And the first director I worked with, he was like, well, in this scene we need this really loud techno music. And I'm like, oh, really? I have this. And he's like, and we need a soundtrack for the fight scene. And he's like, and I have this, which is completely different, something noisy. And it all fit together in one play, and I was really excited. So I did this, and in 2009, my partner Ruth Schultz and I, we created our own theater production company called Paavada Productions. And since 2009, we've been creating plays all over Germany, sometimes going abroad for tours to present our plays. And at first, we tried to combine spoken word, like text, maybe acting, performance, dance, and media. And then we started shifting more and more towards music and integrating music into our plays more and more. And we've done an audio play that was 4-channel surround sound, and there was people on stage, 2 actors and a dancer, a female dancer. And they created this piece about the fear of descending into poverty, from the middle class world into poverty. And we called it hobophobia, for example. And it was all based on sound. There was some text in there, but it was all based on sound that came from 4 different corners of the room. We used a lot of field recordings in that, for example. In 2012, this was in 2009, I think. No, later, 2011. In 2012, I came across The Art of Noise, which you probably have heard of, by Luigi Russolo. Is there anybody who doesn't know Luigi Russolo? Please. You don't know him? Okay.
I know.
You know him?
I just said Into
Into Narumoru, yeah. Just to recap what we were all about, I read about him, and I read his manifesto, L'Atti del Rumori, where he says that anything that the modern workplace or that the modern industrial city has to offer must be considered music, and there's nothing as boring as that old, stupid symphony concert where people sit and die of boredom. And that was basically one of his main ideas. And his idea was to take these sounds of manufacturing, of streetcars, of everything that has an engine in there, and put it into the concert space and make it available to the orchestra as an orchestra instrument. And this, of course, I think he was one of the first to get the idea. I haven't found anything else of people, putting machines into the concert space. If you know of anything else, please correct me. But I think he paved the way for a lot of people, like even John Cage and people like that. And this was in 2012, and 2013 was the 100th anniversary of his manifesto. And so we were thinking, we should put on a piece. We're always looking for subject matters for the piece, for a new piece. And we said, my idea was, let's build internal rumori, because in the First World War, at the end of the First World War, all the remaining internal rumori that he built were lost to a fire. And even many of the plans that he had made, the detailed plans, were lost. So there's a lot of, there's one picture that you probably all know of the internal rumori, with him between them. And it's all these big wooden boxes with a little thing that comes out that projects the sound. You basically have a lever that often pulls a string tighter so you can tune the thing, and there's a crank in the back so you can rotate a disc that often excites the string that's in there. And these things look awesome, and I really wanted to have one for myself, and all my neighbors with it, and all my friends. But my partner Ruth said, well, actually, everybody has this little device that's totally capable of taking any sound of the modern workplace or the modern machines or whatever, put it into a concert space, plug it in, and play it back. So we don't need to build these complicated machines from 100 years ago, because everybody has one. That's much more complicated, but it's there, and you can just use it. And so we said, well, what do we do? Then we looked at the futurists and Luigi Russolo and this whole circle of Nazi friends or fascist friends. We realized that the futurists were not exactly people who liked human beings as individuals very much. They were like machines, the sounds of war are great, and stuff like that. So we were like, okay, maybe that's not what we want to do. That's not the values that we want to project in our pieces. And so we decided, we read early on that Luigi Russolo was not one of the people who cheered on fascism as much as many others. One of the futurists became the right hand of Mussolini. Russolo distanced himself from fascism pretty early on, which, you know, sort of helped us justify our cause. But anyway, we decided that we wanted to put this into a place where it would work differently, and it would work from a point of, let's say, love for humans, and a love for the human being and for who we are, and to accept people as individuals, and to put the humans back into this whole machine idea. So we decided, let's bring together a choir of people and use nothing but their voices to reproduce these sounds that we wanted to put into the concert space. And we called it a noise choir. Noise as in, not as in brutal noise or annoying noise, but as in bruit or just general Geräusch in German, which means anything that makes a sound. So we put ads in the papers and we printed flyers and stuff, and that we're looking for people who are crazy enough to think they can join or want to join a noise choir. And we had something like 30 people sign up for it, and then some people quit again. But we're left with a group of 20 people of all ages. There was a student who was 19, and there was somebody else who had just finished being a teacher, who was 66 or something. And everything in between, men and women, girls and boys. And it was so much fun, you know. And then I had never done this before. Like I said, I had no formal musical training. I don't really read a lot of music or write it, you know, as in written notes. So I was standing there with these people and thinking, how do we do this? And I gave them all a record. No, first of all, I said, let's do a sound walk. That was the first step that we did. I resorted to the ear cleaning techniques that Robert Schaefer, Murray Schaefer, and Hildegard Westerkamp taught me 6 years ago. I think that was it. And we went on sound walks and listened to the city and listened to the sounds that we encountered. And suddenly something happened with the people. Then we passed out recorders to everyone. Not to everyone at the same time, but you know, people took turns and took little handheld recorders to their workspace, if possible. The therapists didn't, but the others did. And then we recorded everything. They recorded everything and they brought it back, and they gave it to me to listen to. And I realized a funny thing, that these days, you know, 100 years ago, people were, I don't know, a blacksmith, or a miner, or maybe they were selling meat, or something else, milk, cheese, whatever. All these professions made distinctly different sounds. These days, it doesn't really matter what you do. The one sound that everybody makes is, I hope I'm not destroying it, it's just the typing on the keyboard. And it's really weird, you know, you're creating a theater play, and it's me and my partner sitting in the room and we're typing things, and we're writing emails, and the only other sound is that when the email goes out. Or we got this recording back from a person who runs or administrates a dance studio, and it's the same sound. And you can imagine that the people who work in Rammstein, the American drone pilots, it's basically the sound they make. They're at war. They're killing people. But the sounds they make is the clicking of some joystick or a mouse or something on the keyboard. And it's really weird to think about that. So that's the first thing that we realized. And then, of course, we sort of, you know, tweaked the sounds that we found. You know, all the 20 people brought back sounds, and many were very similar. So we said, let's find sounds that work as a past pro toto, so to say, that work as a symbol, and then let's look for different sounds that are more distinct. So we had made these films, and we found this in one of the documentary films that my friends had made. There was a portrait of a company that was into biotech, and they had this thing that had, I don't know, something like 100 test tubes in a small thing, and it moved back and forth, and there was this dropper that inoculated each of the test tubes, and the thing with the test tubes was moved around, made a beautiful sound, tuned to G major. So you could tell, which is very interesting, if you have machines these days, robots, they're usually tuned to a major scale. because if it's not major, if something goes wrong, and then you can hear that something goes wrong. You know, it goes and if it doesn't do that sound, then it goes you know, oh. And that's really interesting. You know, it's acoustic feedback in these machines that's built in. So that was one of the interesting machines that we found and that we recreated for our choir. As people came into the choir and others dropped out, we worked on it took us something like 6 months to develop the entire piece with the choir. So that was some people who left and came into the choir later on. And these people had never heard the original recordings. Because sometimes, you know, we wouldn't have them anymore, or we had gone through that process already, and we wouldn't go back and play everyone the original recordings. So everything they had was the sounds that we made with the choir in the rehearsals, which must have been really strange, come to think of it. Let me have a look at, okay. So we gave people the recorders, we developed the sounds, and then we came back to rehearsals, and I sliced up the sounds and tried to, you know, get rid of a lot of the sounds that I found too long, or something that is not distinctive enough, or stuff that overlaps with other sounds and stuff. So I created these little sound scenes and gave them to the people in the choir. Divided the choir into small groups often, and told these groups, please reproduce these sounds with your own voice. At first, I had developed the sound myself, and I came into the rehearsals and told people, you should make that sound, you make that sound, and then I think you three, you should make these sounds and stuff, which was a lot of work for me, and I had a feeling that everything went in one direction, because it was all my ideas and my thinking, and sometimes I was thinking things that didn't work because they were much too complicated to reproduce. These people weren't choir singers or anything, they were just regular people who would enjoy making weird sounds with their voices. And so we reevaluated that basically and told people, you three, you know, take the sound and come up with something. And you three come up with the other sound, and then we put them together and we developed a scene. And that really worked really, really well. We had many, many different sounds and very strange approaches to how to make these sounds. And the one thing I told them is, don't use your body, use your voice. You know, you can't clap or do things like stomping. And sometimes they would come back with something that involved clapping, and say, okay, in this case, maybe we can do it. But the idea was to just use the voice. And it worked really well. The next thing was, we could only rehearse once a week. So from Tuesday night to Tuesday night was a long time. And so often people were sick, and they couldn't come, they had other arrangements on the following Tuesday. So we had to develop a language for these sounds, which was very interesting, because you can't just write down musical notes, even if I could, you know, seriously write them. You can't just write them down, because you have to voice, you know, write down something that lets you reproduce a sound like me, for example. And I was thinking, wow, sometimes recordings helped a lot, of course. So we recorded basically everything. The recorder was always on when we were rehearsing. But it's very tedious to go through 2.5 hours of the recordings and to listen to everything and to go like, oh, okay, this is the spot that is really good. So I resorted to using the IPA language of phonetics, because I had studied phonetics at one point in my life, and so I knew how to write these. And that really helped. Then I just wrote, welcome, please sit down. Also, I just wrote German syllables and tried to, I don't know, make little symbols around them so that I remembered that it was a rising O or something like that. And welcome, please come in. And then I developed these huge spreadsheets that looked like this, which is a scene. It's a big, complicated soundscape. A complex soundscape. You can feel free to come down here and look at it later on. This is the scene of an office situation. It's a woman who works in her office, and she does all these little things, like she types on the keyboard, and then the phone rings, so she rolls her chair across the room, picks up the phone, then she walks over to the copy machine and puts something in the copy machine, and there's copies going through. And then at the end of her workday, she rolls the drawer shut. She gets up, she walks through the door, her keys dangling in her pocket. She calls the elevator, and it goes down the elevator and out the front door. And that was the whole scene. With this sound choir of 20 people. And of course, you know, you had to, then somebody was missing and I had to replace the sounds because there was a key sound that somebody had to jump into, and that took a lot of time. But this is the way we sort of managed to do this. And it's very hard to reproduce in any meaningful way, so I decided to just bring it here in the original, and you can just kind of look at it. I hope that's fun. Then, while we were playing, or rehearsing, I developed these gestures to, because I was directing the choir, and I had my little baton, which was a yellow American pencil, that I used to just give time. Because people were very happy to just have time, you know. They were not musicians, and they just wanted to have a strict downbeat. You know, it had to be military. And it worked really well, because people were like, oh, so if you go up, then I have to do the sound. And it worked really good. But then, of course, we needed more than just that. And I play in this band, which is a jazz band of 30 people. And in that band, we play written music, but sometimes we play improvised sections. And the leader of that band has also developed some really good gestures for sound making that were sort of derived from sound painting, but were very not as self-explanatory as some of the sound painting was. So this symbol, for example, means play less, play so little that there's holes in the entire sound. There's silences in the entire sound. This means play half as much as what you're playing right now, or singing right now. And these gestures were really important to do. And there's a lot more gestures that I used to just get people to be more outgoing, to just do things. So it's like, we did a second play 2 years after, where we were doing a sound choir with 8 people, and we were doing a soundtrack to the film Inferno by an Italian team of directors from 1912. And the sound choir would make all these sounds of hell, because it was Dante's Inferno. And there's one scene where there were werewolves or these strange wolves, and I would always go, give me more, give me more. And that's really, it looks silly, or people laugh at me and they're like, what are you doing? But it's very important to get these people who are just not musicians to really express themselves and to be, if I do it, then they can do it too, because it's okay to just make a fool of yourself. How much time do we have? 15 minutes. Okay, now it's fast. I would like to teach you a scene from the play AG Klang that we did. I have DVDs for you all. You can have a DVD later on. The scene is a quote from Russo's work, and it's called The City Awakens. And he did this thing with the Untitled Chapter. It's a longer piece. And we called it that because we thought if we do it with the noise choir in 2012, 2013, it'll be totally different from what he did. But it's something that works really well. And the way we did this is we didn't record the city in the morning, but we all had our memories of what the city sounds like in the morning. When you're getting up, maybe you're opening the window, and you hear the sounds of the cars, the sounds of bicycles, and it's far away, and it becomes more and more. And then you hear these individual sounds that are overlaid on top of these traffic sounds. And the way we did this is that everybody made the sounds of these cars to have a sort of a carpet of sound. And then everybody had 2 special sounds. And they were in front of me as a circle. Let me show you a picture. This was the sound choir. This was the only thing that we had besides the voice was these cones that we used to project sounds. And you can see my rather long music stuff. So everybody had 2 sounds that we called them specials. And somebody made the sound of a bicycle. Somebody made the sound of birds. Somebody made the sounds of an S-Bahn going by. there was a truck backing up, like the delivery truck that brought the bread to the bakery. Somebody else had also bird sounds, but a different bird sounds. Barking of a dog, an engine, steps, like footsteps, the ringing of a mobile phone, and stuff like that. So what I would like to do now is join me and help me recreate this scene. I would like to ask you to maybe come down here, and we all stand. Let's put the table to the side. Are any of you singers?
Yeah.
You are a singer? Anybody else? So we don't have a lot of time to warm up, but what I would like to do, if we had more time, is teach you how to warm up your voice, because it's very important, to have your voice really in your abdomen, to breathe, like you should. And the way to do this, the first thing you do is you put your hands underneath your navel, and you breathe in, close your eyes, and as you breathe in, feel how your belly pushes outward against your hands, and then with a very slight push of your hands, feel as you exhale how your belly goes towards your spine. Just breathe in and breathe out. Now as you breathe in, you stop for a second, and then on your exhale, you form the sound very silently. You inhale in, and again. Make sure that sound stays the same volume, stays the same distance the whole time, from the beginning to the end of the sound. It's one thing to get your voice rich. Another thing is just speaking, screaming, shouting, singing. And so there's a lot of warm-up things that you do when you're singing. And one is you just do these little exercises where you go, oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow, oh. So you can all join me. Oh, wow, 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 oh. Go up a half tone. Oh, wow, 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 wow. Oh, wow, 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 wow. I skipped a half tone. Oh, wow, 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 wow. Again. Oh, wow, 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 wow. And you can do this forever and for an hour or something if you want to warm up. We don't have the time, unfortunately. It's only 40 minutes. So another thing we do is you have to get the voice into the body. And if you just sit there and stand there, your shoulders start to go like this. We don't want that. So you move your shoulders like this. And the best way is to move them forward first, and then move them backwards. Because then they stay like this. And that's better, because your chest is open. Because if you're on stage, if you're in a circle like that, you want to have that light right here, and to shine into the audience. You want your shoulders back, and to stand like the mountain. If any of you have done yoga before, you stand. Feet are aligned, shoulder width apart. When you stand, you feel like there's something, there's a string to the top of your head. And all these things, breathing. If you want to get into music, you have to learn to listen. If you want to get into singing, you have to learn to breathe. That's very important. And I consider this all singing, of course, because it's using your voice in a special way. Another thing is glissandi. You start from it, and you go really high to really low. As high as you can to as low as you can. And to support this, you breathe in, you go, you get it into your body. So everybody, breathe in and stretch out your arms and go. One more time. Breathe in. and you breathe in again. Shaking. Shaking is one of the best things you can do to enter your body, to be really in the moment, to be there. You just put your feet shoulder width apart, straight, and then you just go like this. And then you go. Feel how your voice drops down and down and down and down. This is really a rushing through all these warm-up exercises, because now I want to do this. How much time do you have? 5 minutes. 10 minutes? 5 minutes. You have that sign somewhere. So the next thing is, you all make the sound of cars going by. Do you know what I'm talking about? A car going by in the distance. It's the sound. I don't want to make the sound that I'm thinking of, but think about you're opening your balcony door in the morning. You step outside and you hear the city down there, and all these cars go by one by one. You can hear the Doppler of the cars. Can everybody think of the sound? Okay, everybody start making the sound. Softly. Stop for a second. If you have a lot of noises, like the shh sound, then it becomes like a rainy day, because the cars go through the puddles. And if we have more engine, like more humming, it sounds more like a dry day. So you can, these are different things. Let's try for a drier day, okay? Again. Start very softly, very softly. The cars go by. Now, if I point at you, make it a special sound, like a bicycle or something you can think of that comes to your mind in the morning that happens in the city. Keep making the sounds of the cars. And if you don't have a special, just go like this and then point at something else. And go back to the sound of the cars when you're done. Who wants to start? I want to point at somebody.
Gong. Gong.
Very city. I like your city. Very German. So it works really well, and it's really a lot of fun to do this. With this group, we're 12 people. It's already a huge group, to make these sounds. We have a lot of volume for this type of thing. I'd like to, since it works so well, and we have 5 minutes, right? Do we have 5 minutes? Okay. Let me try to do one more thing, as Steve Jobs would say, and that is something we call the nanotech thing. It's another machine that we had a recording of, and it's 5/4 time. And I need 2 people to start. Who volunteers? 2, awesome. So the first two, you are the main beat basically. So it goes 1, 2, 3. Let me get my button. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Z, 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 did it count right?
Yep.
She was right.
You want it on 4?
No, on the 3 end.
Okay.
Okay, stop for a second. I need 2 more. 2 more people? You.
You're next.
So as you do this, I count in 1 bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You go, wow, wow. Wow, wow. Wow, wow. Other one. Wow, wow. Wow, wow. Okay, stop. That's great. I need, how many do I have? 2 more. 2 more. You and you. And you go, oh, oh. Oh, oh. Oh, oh.
Oh, oh. Oh, oh. Oh, oh. Oh, oh.
Great.
Oh, oh.
Great. Memorize it. Then we need somebody who can keep time. Can you keep time? Okay, you just go tick, tock, tick on every beat. Go tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. So you've got a 2 time. So yours is shifting the entire counting. That's very good. Then only I could read this. Who can do soprano? Can you do soprano? Very high, as high as you can?
I can as high as I can.
As high as you can.
It's very high.
No, I'm a tenor or baritone at best.
Okay, on the 2, you do this very high and sort of, rubato. On the 2. 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And where is the wheel?
On the 2.
Okay.
1.
Okay.
On the 2. 1. 4, 5. On the 2. 1. 2, 4, 5. 1. 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm sorry. I haven't done this in a while. One more time.
I think I got it.
Okay, I got it. For now, let's everybody who's got a sound, let's do it because we have 1 minute. I do 1 bar. 1, 2. What? I do 1 bar first. Sorry. That's okay. No, never mind. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everybody else, join in with something that you hear. Sorry, again, I miscounted. I keep miscounting. Everybody, I didn't assign a sound. Just join in with a sound that you've heard that you like, and then let's do it all together. And that's the last thing we do. I do 1 bar, and then we all join. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Louder. Louder. Follow the beat.
very much, Kai.
Woo!
Good.
I hope that was better than just talking
Yeah.
about what we did.
That was very good because now my voice is
It's
now
all
warmed
warmed
up
up.
because I have to moderate the opening section.
So
So,
everybody who wants a DVD, please have one.
Thank you so much.
Can I have a piece?
I'm really curious.
Thank you.
so again, thank you, Kai. Due to time, we don't have time for questions. I would rather move on to our next speaker, but we have after this session our opening session. There is enough time that you can talk to Kai and also then to Nina. So,
One more thing, please talk to me today. I have to leave tonight.
so yeah, thank you very much for
Thank you.
this information. So our next speaker is Mina Wenzel. She is from Germany, Hildesheim. Right? She's a sound artist, and well, she's actually very present on this conference. She will do now a presentation, and well, she will also set up for us an installation where you can look at it. Oh, this is my. Oops. Thank you very much. Where you can look at in the room F15115. This is one floor up. And she will also do on Saturday, tomorrow, her performance is called Sampling Identity, and it's also the same title of her presentation. So, Mina, thank you very much that you're here, and the word is yours.
Thank you. The actual plan was that you might have seen the installation already, but the room isn't ready now or isn't ready yet. So I go through the installation / live performance. It is one piece, and I describe my theoretical background and so on, so that you get an idea. And I try to do this not too quick, but in a good amount of time, so maybe we have time for questions and a little talk afterwards. To begin with, I want to give you, as I said, insight in the theoretical groundwork of my artistic approach, as well as a contextualization of my method, or the methods I worked with, and how they connect on an aesthetic level with the topic of sampling identity. First, I want to clarify my perspective on a theoretical discourse on gender, sex, trans identity, and gender expression. If you haven't guessed it already, I'm transgender, surprise. To do so, I will shortly summarize important views on the topic and also set them into relationship with my own real-life experience of gender identity. Since my own trans identity and bodily experience are very main influencing factors of my artistic work on sampling identity and furthermore. Thereafter, I will describe the production methods I used during my work, and I will give an insight on the theoretical approach on sounds as sonic objects and acousmatic listening practices, and my understanding of sampling or sample production as modern day or contemporary approach to this technique originating in the musique concrète in the 1950s. In the end, I want to personally reflect on what this work means for me as a trans person, and as a trans person also in the artistic field and the field of sound and music, and what artistic representation can do for queer identifying people in the field of media representation and artistic representation and so on. But I try to keep it so you have the factor of surprise when you get to listen to my work. So I don't give you a very broad interpretation. I can't prevent it completely, but I try to keep it short, so I don't give away the fun
for you. But at first, let's set the groundwork, a brief insight into contemporary gender theoretical discourses and queer identification. What actually means the word queer? In its original meaning, the word queer describes something which differs from a socially accepted norm, such as an eccentric personality expression, like you directing the choir would be queer. It's not that normal in society or in day-to-day life. And it was used as, for the German speakers, perverse, or for the English speakers, you could translate it to perverse or abnormal. It was quite the slur, and it was quickly used to describe people who diverge from a norm with sex, heterosexuality, and heterosexual relationships between cis people. For those of you who don't know, cis people are people who identify with their gender given at birth. So someone gets out of the womb and the doctor says, "You are a man," and through all of the life of this person, the person says, "Yes, I'm a man," so this person is a cis man. So it was quickly used to describe people who diverge from a norm that sets heterosexual relationships between cis people as the default. So homosexual men and women, trans people, drag queens, drag kings, and others were referred to with the slur queer. But the word was reclaimed by members of the LGBTQIA+ community as an umbrella term or as an identity taken on by some LGBTQIA+ people to describe sexual and or gender identity. In this new interpretation, it reflects the positionality and that addresses the cis heteronormative day-to-day system that is oppressing and builds oppressing structures in society. So being queer means placing oneself, noticing this heteronormative system and placing oneself, noticing it out of this narrative of society. That means queer people, or the word queer always implies a certain level of resistance and the deniance of the pressure of it, or not the deniance, but the resistance against the pressure of a heteronormative society, and the pressure to clearly identify one's identification. So queer, you could say, is kind of a term for an identification that determines as a non-identification, if you would say so. Or to say it with the words of Jodie Taylor, queer can be a political, ethical approach and an aesthetic equality, a mode of interpretation or a way of seeing, a perspective or orientation, or a way of desiring, identifying, or misidentifying. Meaning, queer can be pretty much, and that is kind of the concept of queer. You don't have to be set in stone with what you mean when you refer to yourself as queer. Quick overview about the terms identity and identification. Talking about identifying and misidentifying, we come to this point. Again, Jodie Taylor. Grounded in the deconstructive and denaturalizing logics of post-structuralism, queer theory takes up the critique as set out by Jean-François Lyotard and others of truth, knowledge, objectivity, and authenticity, and argues that there is no universal human subject, especially not one that can be understood as stable or unified. Queer theory proposes that identities are generated by discourses, regimes of disciplinary knowledge, and as such, they are contingent, grounded into historically and culturally specific concepts. Stuart Hall, another scholar of cultural theory and cultural studies, calls this concept of an unstable identity the so-called fragmented identity. He describes this as a fluid process. According to this, an individual is permanently going through a process of identity building, rebuilding, reconfiguring, reconstructing, and this is influenced by societal and cultural environments. So the identity of a person is generated in the discourse, in the conflict, if you want to say so, between you and society, and it is a constant durational process. So instead of the term identity, Hall uses the term identification to emphasize the fluidity and the possibility of the constant remaking of identity, and the possibility also of different simultaneously present identification or identifications one individual can experience, even if they contradict each other. So a person in this concept can have more than one identity or identifications at the same time, or based on the situation the person is in. So let's focus on what that means for queer identification. Oh, I forgot to click, I think. Sorry. Gender identity and gender expression. Both gender and sex, and when I say sex, I mean the concept of the body, sex, in German Geschlecht, the natural given body parts some people might refer to. So gender and sex fall under the realm of cultural and societal influenced identifiers, which have a huge impact on people's lives, especially for trans people, as you might imagine, and they serve as distinctive categories to determination of social privilege. So with the stuff we heard already, we can imagine, okay, sex and gender might be things that impact identity and identification. There is the public perception of gender and sex as a dichotomy, as gender, the social role you play, and sex, what you have and what you can't change unless you do something physical. I want to emphasize that sex also is a social construct or a cultural construct, or to say it with the words of Eschadel, our body's physicality is not a construct. The way our bodies are is simply undeniable. However, labeling a person based on their physical characteristics is a human design. Body parts are not inherently male or female. They are just body parts. Furthermore, you could say it with Judith Butler in terms of gender and sex as cultural distinctive constructs. Gender, understood as one way of cultural configuring a body, is open to continual remaking, and that anatomy and sex are not without cultural framing. The very attribution of femininity to female bodies, as if it were a natural, necessary property, takes place within a normative framework in which the assignment of femininity to femaleness is one mechanism of the production of gender itself. Meaning, sex and gender together produce an identification in society. One is rarely producing identity or identifying from the point of the society to an individual without the other. They interlock when it comes to referring to people and describing people and identifying people. Under this assumption, the term gender identity refers to the way one describes themselves based on their consciousness about their body experience and their perception of themselves in a social environment. Based on Hall's definition of identification, it seems necessary to state that this also describes a fluid process, and therefore has to be called gender identification, to clarify its processual nature. If we speak of gender identification, we speak about a performative act of identity production. This act is most commonly done in an unconscious discourse between the own experience and societal perception of an individual, and in conclusion, it is often based on deeply internalized social distinctions. In case of queer individuals, the identification, namely for trans individuals, is way more conscious. This performative act becomes a very conscious act and depicts a very essential part of one's identity production. It is also important to stress out the role society plays for queer identification, as identifications are or can be verified in social context, as well as they can get undone, to quote Judith Butler, if they are not understood or if they are misinterpreted. This can lead to an enormous level of mental distress for queer individuals and might cause different states of social oppression, as you might imagine. That feeds into the state for trans people called dysphoria. To clarify this term, gender dysphoria means the distress or unhappiness experienced because one's gender does not match their sex and or gender assigned at birth. This can apply to bodily as well as social dysphoria, and it takes place when the environment does not affirm one's identification. To give you a glimpse, it is different for everyone, but it can be a feeling, you know, okay, it's just in my head, but it manifests itself in almost physical pain, and that's not funny. An important tool to successfully produce a queer identification can be gender expression. Gender expression helps to communicate one's perception of the own gender identity and gives clues to the language others should use when referring to a queer individual. Different ways of gender expression might even help individuals to feel connected with their gender and their gender identity, affirm their gender to themselves, produce a natural self-perception, alleviate dysphoria, and liberate from social pressure. Meaning not just in the communication with the society, but also for yourself and your self-perception. Gender expression can be a useful term to feel connected with your body, to feel connected with an identity, to feel basically good. Gender expression describes the conscious act of using socially and culturally connoted practices such as elements of clothing, language, body language, voice, name, smell, pronouns, cosmetics, art, decor, hairstyle, and so on, or sometimes medical measures such as hormone replacement therapy or different kinds of surgeries, to confirm or to not conform to a gendered and sex normativity, and to break with it in some cases. The body in this case serves as a surface for individual expression. Before communicative strategies such as language are used, bodies are the embodiment of the Before communicative strategies are used, such as language, bodies are the embodiment of the identification and are read and understood or misunderstood. Meaning the body of a person is the interface and tool of self and societal expression at the same time. Okay, I have to hurry. As this is also important for alleviating social and dysphoric stress, as I have pointed out, gender expression becomes a decisive factor in queer empowerment in the form of appropriation of the own identification against rigid and binary societal and diagnostic norms. But what does this actually mean? Luckily enough, we have a trans individual in the room, so I can tell you that's me. And then you see some terms that I would connect with myself. My gender expression is pretty feminine. I would refer to myself as genderqueer, as non-binary, meaning binary. Gender definition means there are just men and women, two. Binary, I'm non-binary, I'm outside of this binary. I'm trans, I'm a trans woman, I use she, her pronouns, I'm lesbian, but I'm also pansexual, meaning I'm queer because for people who look at this from a maybe binary point of view, these might contradict each other. But for me, they all refer to me, and I feel connected with them. And I like to chuck an asterisk wherever possible. So that's kind of what I mean with different, not on the first glance fitting labels, but they are all very fitting to me. And my gender expression is, although read really feminine, the way of making myself feel good and alleviate from my own dysphoria. Now to something completely different. The question is, because we don't have that much time, shall I explain musique concrète and
No.
or do you all know and we
Yes.
can?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is what I wanted to hear. So we come to the exciting stuff. I have to look where it is. The human body is a concrete object of composition. Between musique concrète and my production technique, I see a very decisive link. Understanding sounds that are linked to their perception, to their origin, and the human body in society. My approach is that people are constantly gendered on their day-to-day lives based on their outer experience. With this comes a strong association with a strict culturally coded rule of behavior and ability. To actively break through these associations can be understood similar to acousmatic modes of perception, meaning my very own trans perspective. I try to perceive my body as a concrete object with characteristics and values, such as sound objects also have, that aren't defined by my gender assigned at birth, and I perceive my gender assigned at birth like the sound source in the realm of sound objects. So I try to cut myself from this sound origin, from my gender assigned at birth, and emphasize the so found values and characteristics and give them another possible direction to be interpreted based on my gender expression. In this way, so I kind of apply manipulative techniques to transform the perception of myself. So I can achieve a mode of transformation, on the one hand to overcome my own dysphoria, and on the other hand to help my environment in perceiving me separate from my origin. As a sonic object, as a core of compositional, as the sonic object, as core of a compositional method stays the same, and the manipulation only alters the perception of the object, my body stays the same. It is my very own body. It is the one that I got with my birth. But the transformation takes place in the realm of the perception. So as composers of musique concrète, we're looking for musical potential of sonic objects, which are covered by the association with their origin. I'm working on discovering my own transformative potential that is submerged by an overload of gendered expectations. Again, transformation, I already said this. So I enable and overcome an uncovering of the buried characteristics and values. So we have made it so far that I can show you what I actually did. I sampled pretty much everything I could produce with my body and which is linked with my gender expression, such as my jewelry and my hair, which is gekent, I don't know, brush. Thank you. And I didn't label these sounds. I took them as my software recorded them, and then I fed them into my sampler. So there are some sounds, such as when I am telling something into the microphone, I can hear and I can understand my own language, so I can identify this. But there are other sounds which I didn't really identify. when working with them, so I put myself in the different level of acousmatic listening, not knowing what sound actually is what. And then I got into the cutting and manipulation, and of course in the 1950s the potential for sound manipulation was limited. Nowadays the potential is vast, and I squeezed them through my DAW, and it got music. So in the end, I just say it freely, so we might have some questions. What is my approach with this? On the first hand, of course, there's the possibility of an installation, so you don't see me. I adapt a little bit when I do this performance live. But for the installation, there's the possibility to maybe put the audience in an acousmatic listening mode or acousmatic space, so they are left alone with the music. Now you know kind of what's happening, but maybe not everything, and you won't identify all the sounds. So to get you in a journey into a trance experience by your own. And I think the potential of my work, at least in my perception, is the experience of gender dysphoria and the opposite, the gender euphoria, which is very important for trans people, when you feel, okay, something falls in place, something is clicking. That's the way, it's how most of us discover that we are trans, is that we feel, wow, that this is so right, it has to be the thing. That's such a deeply emotional and bodily experience that the discourse, especially the discourse that tries to define transgender as a medical condition to give us access to hormones or legal access to our name change and so on, is very rational. And with this, getting into touch with this experience on this musical level, it offers not the opposite to the rational approach. It's very, like, the power of music is very emotional, very direct, and the ratio comes later, so to say. So I think this is a kind of representation of trans identity to give another way of perceiving and to define it and to get in contact and then maybe talk to a trans person and so on. And of course, I'm transgender myself. I'm not presenting, or I'm not talking over a trans person, and this is hugely important because media representation is often from the very subliminal cis heterosexual gaze, which can't really get the whole picture. Yes. You see the sources if you like, but you also have the sources in the book, and there are even more sources because I've quoted more in the book. To be honest, there was a little mistake in the book. You see the reference number 5 in the conference book. This appears 2 times, and but it's not that bad. And so I want to thank you, and maybe we chat a little bit in breaks.
Thank you very much. It's so sad actually that we have to cut up here because you were talking such an important topic, especially about where art is playing here the role to facilitate the voice and to be listened to those topics. So, Mina, thank you very much that you're here, and again, she will have an installation. You need to set it up, right? Like also some other artists. This is the first stage. So, and tomorrow, as I said, Mina will do also performance at the Bahnhof Langstadt. Yeah, in the evening. So that's it. That was our first session. I kindly ask you now that you go to the food or break room, because now in 5 to 10 minutes we start with the opening reception. So I see you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.